Question. I give the call to the member for New England.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. 67 million tonnes of waste is what Australia produced in the 16-17 years. 67 million tonnes. I imagine that's around about the same amount as what we use in domestic black coal. And of course, one of the big issues we have is that countries that used to take our garbage don't want it anymore, and that's fair enough. They say it's your problem, like China. They say it's your problem, you look after it. And so we should. Now, of course, that means we're going to be a lot more reliant on recycling, a lot more having to pay the cost of it domestically, and also very aware of exactly where we go if for the landfill and for the methane production and other things that are byproducts of it. I'm chair of a committee that's actually looking into this, and I must say at the start it would be a little bit helpful if we had a closer connection to other people who are passing legislation on it. And I want to acknowledge those people on the committee, the member, Madam Deputy Chair, who's the member for Cunningham, the member for Cowper, the member for Higgins, the member for Hughes, the member for Morton, member for Wentworth, and we used to have the member for Patterson, but she's gone on to higher duties as the Assistant Shadow for Defence. Now, by reason of the fact that others don't want our garbage, we have to process it ourselves. And one of the great examples of that, Mr Deputy Speaker, is Viola, which is not that far from Canberra, actually, if we just head out, and they use an old quarry, and they collect rubbish from Sydney and also from Canberra. Now, what's interesting about that is that a lot of it that's recycled is turned into basically fertiliser, and that is because a lot of it's vegetation waste, and it goes back into fertiliser, and that's a great outcome. Now, the member for the member for Warringah just brought up the issue with plastics, especially PET is one of the big problems that we have to deal with. In fact, if you go through a bottle, like you buy yourself a bottle of Coke or something like that, you will notice that there are actually different types of plastics. There's plastic in the bottle, there's plastic in the wrapping, and there's a little bit of plastic around the top where you take the lid off. And it's the stuff around the top that causes a lot of the problems. The other stuff can be recycled, but the breakdown of its component parts is something that I was never aware of and have been made aware of through that. Plastics have become more abundant, especially with the things I remember back in the 80s. There's a few of us around here, Minister Irons would remember, once upon a time we used to take water from a tap. It was free, and I remember people coming along and saying, oh well, one of the big sales in the future will be bottled water, and we said, how absurd is that? Well, we're going to pay for something we get for free. And they said, you watch the market, it's precisely what will happen. And they were right. But of course now we've gone from bottled water to bottles themselves, and they're creating a massive problem as they become part of the waste. And some of the things we can do to reduce waste is will also reduce costs, and that is avail ourselves of this wonderful invention, the tap. The tap and a glass or a water bottle that is recycled, and a lot of them are steel. These are the sort of things, small things you can do in your own life, which will make a big difference. Now, what we must also note is that we've got opportunities with recycling waste as well as problems. One of the opportunities is people close to the major capitals don't want garbage tips near them anymore. It's funny, but they're kind of over it. But other areas out west wouldn't mind it if they get the industry that comes with it, because they've got remote areas, they've got mining pits and areas where it could actually avail itself to become part of the industrial or the economic base of those areas. Now, we've had representations in our committee from those councils, and I think this is something we can work on. We're building the Inland Rail at the moment, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I always say, because you've got to claim your wins, I was very happy with the National Party when we obtained the money for that as part of the coalition agreement that I did with the then Prime Minister Turnbull. In fact, he wasn't the Prime Minister when we did it, became the Prime Minister afterwards. And what that means, Mr Deputy Speaker, is with utilisation of such things as the Inland Rail, we have the capacity to get trains with a large amount of waste to regional areas. And I might just suggest one of the advantages of that. As you know, we pull coal out of a whole range of places in New South Wales, and it all makes its way to Wollongong or makes its way to Newcastle to be loaded. And then all the carriages, about 80 in a train, they can carry up to 120 tonnes each, but they load them to 100, go back out to the coal mines in the Hunter Valley and back out to Maules Creek near Narrabri and back out to other areas, empty. Now, logic would say that coal, they're going to burn it, so it can't be, it's not as if you're going to have to eat it. If the coal's coming in one direction, we might be able to utilise some of this infrastructure to take rubbish in the other direction. And as coal comes out of a hole in the ground, when those holes are finished with, we could be utilising them to basically for the remnant landfill, what we do now is we actually put pipes through it, we line it, put pipes through it, and we collect the methane off it. It turns the turbine, creates power. Now, not exceptional amounts of power, but enough power that it warrants doing it. So these are the things, the byproducts we get. It can recycle back into their core componentry, such as steel, scrap metal, that can be recycled back into metal. Plastics can be recycled, but as long as you break them down to the component parts. Vegetable matter can be recycled back into fertiliser, and what we don't recycle can be utilised in landfill, which is not the best way, but even with that we get the capacity to fill in holes and create methane, turn a turbine and create power. And we have the infrastructure in Australia to progress with this in such a form as we can do it away from the cities. It's going to have a cost. There is a cost on this, and that cost is going to go back to the people who either create the rubbish or put the rubbish in the bin. At this point in time, I think it's predominantly on the people who put it in their bin, it's on your rates, and that's where it's off to. Now, hand in glove with this is we have some problems and we need some attitudinal change. We have the example of multiple bins. We have the red bin, we have the yellow bin, and we have the green bin. The red bin for, your dirty nappies and stuff like that. Yellow bin for things that you deem or that the council tell you can be recycled, and the green bin for vegetable waste. Now, there's been well taken up, and people are pretty diligent about what they do. We have had some instances where they go to the tip and all end up in the same hole because the cost of recycling it means that it's not warranted. That has obviously got to change. And once more, if I might direct you to if they believe that the methane that could be produced from the Tamworth tip alone could power the hospital. So it's worthwhile noting. But we have to have the capacity of what we put in that yellow bin to actually end up really being recycled. We've also had the benefit over time, Mr Deputy Speaker, of an attitudinal change. You might remember once upon a time driving along a road in Australia was just festooned with rubbish. People, once they finished stuff, they just tossed it out the window. And to our credit, Australia's been incredibly good at stopping that. Overwhelmingly, I mean, you still get instances of it, but overwhelmingly it's seen as a real, a very bad move, an indictment on your character if someone sees you throwing rubbish out the window. You just wouldn't do it anymore, but in the past, people didn't blink at it. That shows the attitudinal change that progresses towards recycling. So Australia has the capacity within its population to go down the path of recycling. Now, I mentioned, the speaker before mentioned the prospective member for Groom, a gentleman by the name of Garth Hamilton. He's standing for the seat of Groom. He's standing for the seat of Groom for the LNP. He was also part of the Green Shirts movement, something that I'm involved with myself, and I'm sure if he gets the nod from the people of Groom, he will be a great adornment of this parliament, and I believe with a seat such as that, he may well have a very long career. Now, I'd also like to acknowledge what Dr McVeigh did, both at the local level and at a state level, and then finally at a federal level. Dr McVeigh was most certainly a very capable and apt politician and an incredibly decent man. Now, why would I be mentioning Groom? Because we also have the issue of waste, and one of the wastes that needs to be recycled is water, sewage. Now, this caused a massive problem in Toowoomba. Massive problem because people, the thought of it didn't want the idea of recycling sewage and ending up in their drinking water, but other countries do it. Singapore, for one. I think it was even in London, they say it's been through a couple of kidneys before you drink it. This is an issue which, if we can't deal with the issue of recycled water, wastewater, then we should at least walk down the path of having industrial use for that water. When I was in St George, Western Queensland, we had 3 lots of pipes in our house. We had brown water, which was used for your toilet. I mean, if you're going to poo in something, there's no point doing it in potable water. And then we had bore water for the use of for washing, and we had drinking water. And if you went to a house and saw clear water in the toilet, that was not a good sign. In fact, you get I think there was some fine on it. So it just makes sense. Why would we flush potable water? And why don't we use recycled water for industrial uses, for sewage uses, and in new subdivisions look towards the reticulation of different forms of water and utilise them for different forms of use. Now, this is another progression of the attitudinal change, and referring back to what happened at Toowoomba, we're going to see this more and more in other areas. We see ourselves in many instances with a form of water crisis, and we are having to build more water storages for a growing population. But in the future, this will come hand in glove with a form of recycling. We can see the problems even Sydney is having to expand Warragamba Dam, which they should do, with such things as claims made by Indigenous claims, fauna claims, flora claims. All these things have to be dealt with. But whether you like it or not, the population is going to require more water, and therefore we have to work out from what source it is going to come. If you decide you're going to do it through desalination, desalination is bottled electricity, and Australia has the dearest power prices in the world, certainly in the OECD. So that is a very expensive alternative. So we will be forced, whether we like it or not, towards the recycling of water. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, I want to commend the members of the committee that I'm working with at the moment. We have a great committee, very bipartisan. I want to commend the support of the member for Cunningham, Madam Deputy Chair, and the work she's doing towards this. We look forward to delivering a report. I think we're just about through all witnesses today. Our committee will have one of its final meetings before we deliver a report on rubbish. That won't be rubbish in the coming days. And on that, I shall take my leave.
I thank the member for that contribution.